Secondhand Snoke. You like that? It's pretty clever, huh?
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this because this is crazy. Okay, so this was just revealed. Lucasfilm just confirmed without saying anything that Snoke was created with Luke Skywalker's DNA from his severed hand in The Empire Strikes Back. This is insane. This is huge news. So, could you say that he's secondhand Snoke? Sorry, this is a really bad joke. Secondhand Snoke. That's what we're talking about today. So, there was a new issue of Vader 2020, which I don't read, but apparently there was some big news in there. Again, I see a lot of new people have joined us. So, we're talking about Snoke was created from Luke Skywalker's hand. Secondhand Snoke. Okay, so there was a Vader 2020 comic which came out last week or week and a half ago, and it implied that Luke's severed hand from The Empire Strikes Back was recovered from Bespin, and the DNA was used in the project that created Snoke. Now, it should be noted that Luke Skywalker's severed hand has been discussed as a plot device in the sequels before. More specifically, in one of the first drafts of J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens. I'm sure you guys know the story, but originally, The Force Awakens was meant to open the opening shot after the crawl. It was going to pan down, and in space, we see Luke's severed hand floating in space, holding the Anakin lightsaber. And that was going to be the opening. And then it crashes down to a planet. It burns in the atmosphere. The hand burns to dust, but the lightsaber lands in the dust. And that's how Maz Kanata found it. And that was the original opening. So there were talks way back in 2014 about this hand was used for some purpose. Why else would they put that in there? And it seems like now they are coming back to that. And of course, that lightsaber was going to act as the main MacGuffin for the sequel trilogy, which was ultimately scrapped. But it's been talked about before. So let me show you this comic here. So if you're watching on the video, I'm going to put the comic up on screen. If you're an audio listener, I'll try and describe it. So in this page here, we see Darth Vader walking through this laboratory, and he says, and I quote, "The scalpel of creation. I used it to make all of these things. I can use it to make anything." And he's walking by a bunch of vads with clones inside of them, similar to Exegol, how the vads of Snokes, the jar of Snokes, were all around Palpatine. And then on one of the tables, we see in a jar Luke's severed hand. And these creatures look very similar to Snoke. So this basically confirms, without saying it explicitly, that Vader is responsible for the creation of Snoke by using Luke's hand to make them, or at least start that process. And this makes sense narratively with The Mandalorian, because we know they were trying to use Grogu's DNA to create something, which is pretty apparent. It's probably Snoke, because they look just like him. And they're trying to think of how to word this here. That was a failed attempt. And who they needed it from more would have been Luke Skywalker. But it's a little inconsistent because this comic takes place before all of this, which means they already had Luke's hand. And they were obviously making something with this. It could be a total misdirect, and they're using it for some other being that has nothing to do with Snoke, because nothing was directly implied. But it's something really interesting to discuss. And it's more than just cloning. They need something to power this, right? What's the city that they're the cloning planet? Camino. They're not a Camino. This is an independent project outside of that. Camino's probably dead at this point. There was also something revealed in this, and it is this page here. So To the audio listeners, this page reveals that there's this huge structure of Kyber crystals mounted together. And this is possibly something that powered either the creation of Snoke or the creation of the Death Star or a bunch of other things. But this is an immense amount of power. And we do know from legends, from Rebels TV show, that Palpatine collects artifacts from around the world, also including Kyber crystals, to advance his power in the universe. So this was something interesting too. Now, back to the Snoke comment about the DNA from Luke's hand. This changes everything we know about Snoke. Like, that is canonical in the sequel trilogy. Because we are told in The Force Awakens, I think, that Snoke is an ancient being. It says that on the picture. It says that in the visual dictionaries. It says it in the novels. And it was also stated that Snoke was around to influence Ben Solo to turn to the dark side from when he was a young boy. But if the DNA from Snoke was used to create him from Luke's hand, he's not an ancient being. You could argue that it's an extension of Palpatine. Palpatine's an ancient being, but even Palpatine's not that old. He's only 180, I think. But it changes everything, because that would make him essentially almost the same age as Ben Solo. Right? Or close to it. And he's not a more of a power figure at that point, because he's so ancient. And I don't know, this is really interesting. It's kind of something no one's talking about, which is weird to me. I would love to hear what you guys are saying, so I'm going to head over to the chat and see it here. And of course, any of the audio listeners, if you want to talk to me about this, you can join me on Instagram or Twitter at Han Talks First, and we can talk about it there, because I'm always down to talk about this stuff. Max says that I'm okay with it, that Snoke's was a clone, but in my opinion, they don't need to connect everything to the Skywalkers. That's a very common sentiment. A lot of people are like, there's no other people in the galaxy. There's all these Skywalkers. So, I agree. Robin says, secondhand Snoke. You like that? It's pretty clever, huh? That's mine. I didn't steal that from anywhere. I'm the first person to say that. So, when the video version of this stream comes out, the title will be Secondhand Snoke, which I think is pretty clever. I'm surprised they didn't put that in the movies. Max says, I think Grogu's blood was needed to recreate Palpatine. Okay, so Grogu's blood was used for Palpatine, but Luke's blood was used for Snoke. Interesting. Very interesting. Good thing to point out there. If you are listening on the YouTube page and just joining us now for the first time ever, welcome. Please consider subscribing. Like this video, guys, please. I see a lot of you who've joined us today. Please give this video a like. It helps out way more than you can possibly imagine. And if you're new, consider subscribing. New videos all the time. And if you're listening on the podcast form, follow or subscribe on Apple Music. Rate and review. That helps out so much too. And then you never miss an episode. Tomorrow, May the 4th, if I don't see you or you don't come on the show tomorrow for the stream, have a great Star Wars day. I hope you get to relax, watch some Star Wars, enjoy the Bad Batch, and we'll talk about it tomorrow here on the podcast and then again next week. So for now, everybody, have a good rest of your week. Thanks for joining us today. And somehow, somewhere this week, may the Force be with you.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.